hearing Kaveret and singing that Yo-Ya song this evening. It's nice to have everybody here. And welcome to our Thursday evening Erev Tov. I'm Rabbi Jamie Aklepi, and welcome to one of the Temple Beth studios, out of the studios. This is our weekly show that begins your weekend with a little bit of happy hour, getting to know somebody in our community and hearing their stories and some words of wisdom. So tonight, in a few minutes after we mix our special drink, we have a wonderful guest and Temple Beth member, Al Sunshine. And if you're in South Florida, of course, you know Al Sunshine, former longtime CBS Channel 4 investigative and consumer reporter. He'll be telling us some stories about his days as an investigative and consumer reporter. His famous Shame on You features how he helped to change laws, how he spoke at different congressional testimonial hearings, and really made such a big difference for consumers. A little bit maybe on the Cocaine Cowboys documentary, and so many different things that affected our lives here in South Florida. So before that, it's been a beautiful sunshiny day here in South Florida. And so we have a special drink, not just any drink in honor of Al Sunshine, but the drink itself is called the Sunshine, believe it or not. And this drink is made from, I'm gonna mix it all up right here in front of us. 2 ounces of white rum, half an ounce of French vermouth. And because I'm a good student, French vermouth is the white vermouth, is the dry vermouth. French dry white, half an ounce in our L'chaim Shabbat glasses. 1 ounce of pineapple juice, which is now the juice I always have here. It's been incredibly helpful for this show. And a dash of grenadine. This has been a new purchase, a new COVID purchase. Just to figure out how to open it. You see, I've used it so much. Uh-oh. Here we go. A dash. Let's see what a dash looks like. I wonder if that was more than a dash. We'll see when I, in an ice shaker. Dog is somewhat concerned by that sound. And let's strain it and see what the Sunshine looks like. Maybe my dash, oh no, there it is. Look how, by the way, I just want to say that this is the first time I've made this drink. The color is great, like Sunshine. It's in this beautiful coupe glass that belonged to my great aunt and uncle. Okay, Al, this is to you, L'chaim. Let's see what it tastes like. It's a little heavy on the vermouth for my tastes. I'll taste it again just to be sure. This is nice and cold, and it has a touch of pineapple, and it's really, really strong. So this drink, as pretty as it is not going to be for me for this evening. Wow. But just if it's a drink for you, I'll review. It's called the Sunshine, 2 ounces of white rum, half an ounce of French vermouth, which is the white dry or white dry of French vermouth, 1 ounce of pineapple juice, and 1 dash of grenadine. Maybe it needs a little more grenadine to probably bring up the sweetness. Strong, shaken with ice, and very smooth. So the other drink, the non-alcoholic drink that I have prepared for this evening, is also, well, this one's really based not on Al Sunshine himself, but for those who are going to be investigative reporters. So I was trying to figure out, what do investigative reporters drink? There's an ethos that whiskey or scotch, I'm thinking of Lou Grant on Mary Tyler Moore always had whiskey, but I thought for the non-alcoholic drink, it is going to be black coffee. I can't really tilt it because it will spill. And I have it here in my WRN. Those aren't call letters for a radio or TV station, but that sounds like it, which is why I took it. Women's Rabbinic Network travel mug. I have my black coffee because, like investigative reporters, women rabbis need coffee. Black coffee, that should get the job done. So here we have literally opposite ends of the spectrum for drinks, but to make an Erev Tov, to make a good evening, you have your choice. So let's get to our special guest and see what we can learn and how we get to meet Al. Long career, and what he's doing now, retired, is really also very important and very interesting. So Al Sunshine, come on in. Uh-oh.
Here we go.
There you are.
I'm on.
You're on. Do you see me? Because I don't see you. Andrew, do you see me okay?
Yes, you look great.
Okay, because my screen shows something else. You know what I'm going to do? I think it's because it shows, if I press this, what happens? Maybe I go back. Oh, there we go. Okay, there we go. Now I'm back to the regular. All right, so Al, welcome. Welcome to Erev Tov, and thank you for being here this evening as we get to know, as I tell everybody who comes on our show, in this time of social distancing and people staying home, one of the goals is we want to get to know our friends and neighbors better. So this is a chance. So Al, you spent 40 years at local and national levels as an investigative reporter, consumer reporting, and other features. Tell me, what, if you could look back, well, first let's start at the beginning. Where are you from originally?
I've lived in Chicago, Seattle, New York, New Jersey, and Atlanta. And I came to Miami in the summer of 1968 as a freshman at the University of Miami. And
okay.
the new I think it became the Stanford dorms were known as the 68 dorms. And when I came down, they weren't even done yet. And I moved in early because I was with the band of the hour and I got early admission. And I had workers coming in the dorm, finishing painting and finishing electricity. So it was a very, very interesting welcome into the University of Miami and the Miami family.
And what did you do in the marching band? What was your role? What did you play?
I played tenor sax in the marching band. And in the concert band, I played clarinet and bass clarinet. And the funny thing is that first year, I didn't even go home over Christmas break because the band was looking for members to do an outside gig. And I could be paid $75 if I would stay over Christmas break and stay there. And they wouldn't tell us what the gig was until the day before. We were hired by the NFL to be the Super Bowl band, to be on the field for, I think it might have even been Super Bowl III. I actually played with Joe Namath and the Jets and Johnny Unitas and the Colts. I played in that Super Bowl, tenor sax in the NFL band. So it was an interesting story, and I can actually say I played in the Super Bowl tenor saxophone.
That's great. Wow, for $75, and that was probably worth it then too.
Absolutely. And then while I was at the University of Miami, I had the opportunity of writing and taking pictures, and I could say with pride that the University of Miami newspaper Hurricane, when I was one of the editors, just as a fluke, we entered the Intercollegiate Press Association competition for college papers. And we actually won that year. The University of Miami Hurricane was the #1 winner for major schools in the Intercollegiate Press Association. And from there, I got invited by Ralph Rennick to work for WTVJ. And one of my first assignments was the Democratic and Republican convention on Miami Beach, where I got tear gassed and I got to meet Rocky Pomerantz. And I got hired when I got out of college by Ralph Rennick and CBS down here, and got to cover President Nixon whenever he arrived on Key Biscayne, got to cover all the politics, got to cover all the Alpha 66 rallies that were going on, and literally covered history down here. And one of the things that I unfortunately had to cover also was the growing drug killings and drug corruption. And I ended up covering a lot of the cocaine cowboys as it was going on. And that coverage was featured in the movie by a couple of other grads that became cocaine cowboys. And the next thing I know, I'm being invited to movie premieres, and I'm seeing myself on cable television. And it was interesting. I think the highlight of my career was my daughter is a librarian in the Palm Beach County Library System. And she was checking the card catalog for the Library of Congress and just put my name in. And she told me she almost fell off her chair. All of my work covering the Challenger disaster for CNN is cataloged in the Library of Congress. It impressed my kids. So for me, that was a great deal.
Right. The 40 years of work. So we get back to what impressed your child. So you hit the ground running at the conventions and the civil unrest and the riots that were happening at that time. And you were probably, you were a kid yourself. How did you feel? Do you remember feeling frightened, exhilarated, a sense of purpose? What was the motivation to get into this business?
I could tell you that the motivation to get into the business is an insatiable curiosity about what's going on around you, trying to see what affects you and your family and your community, to try to honestly report on it and share the information with others, which is the essence of American journalism, and to basically give people the information that they can understand what's happening in their community. And if they want to be involved in trying to be a positive force for change, they certainly have the ability. And, one of the things that's a tenet of American journalism is, number one, you don't just report what the press releases from the government tell you. You want to see it for yourself. You want to explore both sides. And one of the things that I think is sorely lacking today is you also want to explore solutions and answers. The media cannot be just a negative impact on the community, reporting problems. You have a journalistic obligation to try to look at solutions and to try to give people enough information that they can make decisions for themselves, and doing it honestly and straightly. I could tell you that, one of the problems we're facing today is obviously a lot of friction between the police and minority communities. And Miami went through that tragically, and we had a number of riots because of it. And as a result, for the most part, we implemented programs to try to bring the community and the law enforcement together to realize that there was a role to be played by the police and the community in basically trying to guide what people wanted in their neighborhoods, what they wanted from police, and everybody working together. And, you know, a perfect example is our former city of Miami police department chief going to, I think, Missouri a couple of years ago when there was a lot of problems. And he was able to implement a lot of the peacekeeping and a lot of the inclusion of religious and community leaders with the police department. So with pride, I can say that a lot of the lessons that we learned tragically may be forgotten, but locally, we have put together a lot of programs in place to try to prevent the kind of real violence other communities are seeing. And again, that's the role of the media. I remember years ago being at a confrontation in, I think it was Overtown, where there were 50 or 60 City of Miami police SWAT members, and there were some concerned members of the Overtown community. And they were at a standoff. And as a reporter, I was able to go and talk to the community leaders, and they said, Al, you know, we just don't like having these police in our neighborhood on a Saturday night. Nobody's doing anything wrong. We just don't feel comfortable. And I said, well, you know, what would it take for you to leave and for you to, you know, peacefully go home? And they said, Al, tell you what, you tell the police that we don't want to be here. We want to go home. We want to enjoy our families. And if they leave, we'll leave. I walked across the street with my camera, interviewed the police supervisor, and he basically said, listen, we don't want to be here either. We're here just because there's a big crowd. If all it means is we've got to take off and they'll take off, fine. And they actually did. And that was the role of the media in trying to open up lines of communications, get people talking. I was a journalist, but I was also a member of the community. And having gone through the Liberty City riots and the Overtown riots, whatever could be done to diffuse a situation, bring a community together and heal, that's what our role, you know, has to be also. It's not just exposing problems, it's exposing solutions, it's building bridges instead of walls.
Wow, thank you, Al, for that. What about in your consumer reporting? What did you find? I know that you were able to testify for different congressional hearings. What are you most proud about? What kind of solutions are you most proud about, or resolutions that came about in the consumer world that you had reported on?
I can tell you that the two big things that I'm happy about are giving parents the right by state regulation to know the health inspections in their kids' school cafeterias that the school people were hiding for years. And we were able to get a state law that basically said parents have the right to know what's going on behind the closed doors of the school cafeterias, so that the kids...
It sounds so simple. I mean, it sounds like
Right.
I mean, you send to school, they have, you get a grade on the test paper, and yet you don't know how clean or dirty the school cafeteria is.
Well, the principals and the school cafeteria operators didn't want to let the parents, the teachers, or the students know the dirty little secrets, and that was one good win. I think the most significant good win was, for 2 years, my investigation into car repair scams was played on continuous loop in Tallahassee in the state capitol. And I basically am one of the authors of the state and the county car repair regulations that basically say that you've got to get a written estimate, you've got to get a waiver signed that this is what you're authorizing up to this price, and if they try charging you more, they're in violation. Basically, they can only charge you 10% more, and they can't hide all sorts of extra costs and charges. And I'm basically the author of the state car repair law, and that's something that's very proud, because for years I was getting reports from a lot of single moms that were getting ripped off by mechanics and couldn't afford to get their cars fixed, and they couldn't do anything about it. And that's a perfect example of the media playing the role of the media and investigating a problem, dealing with responsibly exposing the problem and looking for solutions. And believe it or not, the legitimate car repair industry was fed up about a lot of the thugs that were holding people's cars for ransom. And I ended up getting the industry very much behind it, which was a good thing. We also got some laws on the books on car leasing that required the leasing companies to fully disclose, all the charges up front and give consumers the opportunity of knowing exactly what they're signing on. And, that was some of my local coverage. And nationally, I did a lot on Iran-Contra for CNN. I did a lot on Challenger and the space shuttle program, both before and after. And one of the fun stories is one Friday afternoon, I got a call from Atlanta, and they said, "Hey, check on flights down to Barbados. We need you to go to Barbados." And I was like, "Yeah, right. Don't you have anything better to do?" And no, Al, check on flights. And I checked, and they said, "Okay, book you and the crew to go down. You need to go down. Mick Jagger wants to talk to us. You're going to do an interview with Mick Jagger and his live-in Jerry Hall on a story that was down there." And I remember flying down to Barbados, getting in 11:30, 12 o'clock their time, being whisked to the mountaintop estate that Mick Jagger was at, interviewing Jagger, getting done by about 3:30 in the morning, going back to the hotel, sleeping until 6:30 or 7, interviewing the police chief, and then flying back to Miami. So, I got to Barbados to interview Mick Jagger. I was on the ground maybe 7 hours. The drive to and from the airport from Jagger's place was beautiful, but I don't even remember Barbados. But yeah, I did a one-on-one interview with Mick, my buddy, my close friend.
Funny. What do you think was maybe the most frustrating story that you did? A story that maybe was so heartbreaking, or one where you wanted to be able to make a difference and there wasn't any room for change?
Right. I could tell you that the most heartbreaking story I did started off with a phone call in the office. I think it was a Monday morning, from some friends of two local church kids had gone to a ice cream social for their church, and they were missing and it didn't show up. And the friends, asked me, "Hey, can you do a story on these two missing?" And when I called the police were like, "Al, kids go missing all the time. Maybe they ran off, maybe they didn't want their parents to know where they were." And the police weren't really interested. And I just had a little gut feeling that there might be something to it. So I put the information on my desk, and I told my news managers what the story was and to just keep their ear open. And I got sent out to do something else. And about 2 hours later, I got a call. "Hey, Al, go up to Opelika." uh, police are investigating the discovery of 2 murder victims. And I went up there and I told my managers, go get that file that was on my desk. I need to know about it just in case. And it had information on the kids and information on their car. And Rabbi, the 2 kids were kidnapped by a murderer by the name of John Errol Ferguson, who was a local serial killer. I think he is involved in about 5 or 6 murders. And he kidnapped them, murdered them. And while I was interviewing the police, a man came up behind me listening. And when I asked the police what kind of car was found nearby, and they said, oh, it was a late model, freshly painted Ford Mustang. As soon as the police said that, the man barged in the middle of my interview, crying, oh my God, that's my son's car, that's my son's car, that's my son. And it turned out on camera, he found out that his son had been murdered. And it affected me horribly, obviously. We put the story on the air, and a lot of people thought that we shouldn't have put it on the air. And Ralph Rennick did an editorial basically saying, here's a slice of life that you don't see every day. And we report murders and deaths, but you never see the face of the family involved, and you never really feel the tragedy. And that was a very, very, very powerful event that moved me. And one of the things that was difficult too is you don't go through a gut-wrenching event like that without it having an impact on your soul. And I told one of the bosses at the station, I really, really, really felt terrible. It was a horrible experience. It was a sickening experience to go through. And the answer was, nobody cares how you feel. You're a reporter. You were just there. And, that kind of management, lack of concern, believe it or not, tragically, is very, very typical of the news business, where they expect reporters to go in and out of tragedies and it not affect them. And it does. I remember covering a story where a woman's daughter and husband were killed in a horrible accident on the way to the hospital for them to give birth to their first child. And I had the difficult job of go interview the family. And you can't feel good about intruding on a family in their loss. And all I could say is I was able to talk to the parents. I was able to get them to tell me what a wonderful, wonderful daughter that they had, and how horrible they felt from the loss. And all I could say is when I was done with the interview, they were smiling. They were like a weight was lifted off their shoulder. And I realized that as a journalist, I also played a role in just being a good person and talking to people in the good times and talking to people in the tragic times and listening and extending condolences and giving them the opportunity of bringing up some good memories too. And that was the downside of reporting that you never hear about. I did an interview with Dr. Joe Davis at the height of the Miami cocaine wars, where he talked about having to get refrigerated trucks from Burger King to act as temporary morgues for all the murder victims that they had. And he talked about, this happening at the same time all the Mariel criminals had been released to Miami, and the murder rate was just skyrocketing. It was so bad they needed to get refrigerated trucks from Burger King. And Dr. Davis was just frustrated, and he said that, these killers, these cold-blooded killers, are like aliens from outer space. They have no feelings. They're just, they're just cold-blooded and ruthless. And of course, some of the community got upset with Dr. Davis on that. But the reality is that as a journalist, you see people in all sorts of situations. You see the good, you see the bad. You can't be involved in censorship for the most part, but you have to present fair, honest reporting. At least when I was on the streets, it's a little bit different now. But the most important thing is, the role of the media is difficult, and it's changed a lot. And you've got a lot of new people in that are more interested in salaries and making it in the next biggest market to make more money than really connecting and being tied into the community. Now, what I've done since retiring is basically very, very similar to what I did as a journalist, but with the help of some others, I set up an environmental 501c3 nonprofit and set up a environmental advocacy group, the Miami Pine Rocklands Coalition. And we're basically fighting and advocating to try to preserve the last 1.3% of pine rocklands that are only found in the United States here in South Florida.
So tell us so everybody knows, what is a pine rockland? What are they, what distinguishes them? And if you can give us an address so we know, so people can say, oh, I drive past that. That's what a pine rockland is.
Okay. Everybody knows what a pine tree is. That's no big deal. So it's basically a South Florida pine forest. But what are the rocks? And here's the answer to that. If you live anywhere in South Dade or the Keys, you can't dig a hole to put a flower in before you hit rocks. Well, those rocks are the original seabed when South Florida was underwater. It's oolitic limestone. So what the pine rocklands are the survivors when South Florida was underwater, and all that coral rock was the ancient seabed when South Florida was underwater. And the pine trees grow up in those rocks, and there's a forest called a pine rockland. Well, there are pine trees all over the southeastern United States and all over the United States. But here in South Florida is the only location where you have pine rocklands. And basically, if you live anywhere south of roughly Coral Gables, Miami Springs, you are in the area that used to be all covered with pine trees and oolitic limestone rocks. And of course, it's popular to build in because it's high and dry. It's not mucky, it's not a swamp. So for developers and builders, it's a great place to develop. And here's a perfect example. Where can you see a pine rockland? Well, there are about a dozen pine rockland preserves all over South Dade. The biggest one is by Zoo Miami, but there are also some off of US 1 and 152nd Street, and there's a beautiful pine rockland next to Coral Reef Park in Palmetto Bay, and the pine rocklands used to be all over the place. Now, the biggest one outside of Everglades National Park is the Richmond Pine Rocklands, which is where Zoo Miami is. And we fought to try to keep a shopping center to go up. We sued the Trump administration. We sued the developer. We sued the University of Miami. We lost, but we gave it a good fight. And now our big campaign is developers and Dade County are trying to put the Miami Wilds theme park in the middle of the zoo property, and it's right in the middle of endangered habitat for federally protected butterflies and bats and tiger beetles. So we're trying to fight that to try to preserve some green space so that our children realize that South Dade and Florida is not just a bunch of traffic jams and paved over parking lots and shopping centers and strip malls. You have to have green space, and you have to let Mother Nature have her space. And just as an example, what started this whole COVID-19 pandemic? It was people going into a forest, harvesting bats for whatever reason, and using them commercially as a food source. And the bottom line is, we don't have any right to disturb Mother Nature. You've got to leave Mother Nature alone. Mother Nature is the boss. The big news today is that horrible hurricane hitting the Gulf, and my heart and prayers go out to the victims. As a Hurricane Andrew victim who lost his house, I know what's going on, but why are we having hyperactive hurricane seasons? Is it because of global warming? Why along Old Cutler and Palmetto Bay and sections of Miami and sections of the Florida Keys are we getting the worst flooding that we've ever had? Is it sea level rise? Are we starting to see the effects of temperature rising, the glaciers in both poles melting, seawater going up? I've got a tough job trying to let people know that sometimes the best thing to do with Mother Nature is leave her alone and try to limit growth and try to have more recycling, and don't be the horrendous waste that our consumerism has bred. There needs to be more conservation, and our grandchildren need to see butterflies and trees and Miami tiger beetles. And more my neighbors are concerned about more traffic jams, and the loss of quality of life. So I went from being an investigative reporter and advocating for the community as a journalist to now advocating for environmental conservation and preservation and restoration of our pine rocklands, which is not a theoretical problem. It's in our backyards. And if you live in a pine rockland, you'll know it. The pine trees may not be there, but every time you try to plant a flower or a fence or put in a mailbox, you hit rock. Well, that rock is the old seabed, and that's a memory of Mother Nature changes, and we could well be underwater again if we don't watch ourselves.
How can people get involved in the Pine Rocklands environmental projects that you're doing and conservation?
Well, I could say initially I've got my Facebook group, Miami Pine Rocklands Coalition, on Facebook. I think we've got about 2,000 members. Secondly, if you call Fairchild Tropical Gardens, Fairchild, and you ask about their Connect to Protect program, they encourage companies, residences, and government agencies to put in native pine rockland flowers and plants and trees to restore them. And Rabbi, I could tell you, we're doing a lot of construction around Beth. Who do I need to talk to say, hey, are we going to put in any pine trees? Are we going to put in any butterfly plants? What can we do as an organization to try to restore a habitat that is down to its last 1.3% of what it used to be here? So me as a homeowner, I have my little Pine Rockland restoration. A lot of schools are doing school projects for the kids for the science class of putting in Pine Rockland restorations, and maybe Beth Am will want to do it too. Who knows?
Well, I know we have butterfly gardens, but I don't know about the others, but that's a good question to ask. Okay, we'll make a note. And I don't think I have any. I think some of my plants here do butterflies, but I'm going to make a specific check on Pine Rockland restoration plants. So
and again, Connect to Protect through Fairchild Tropical Gardens. They'll be happy to talk to anybody anytime, and they even do free Pine Rockland plant giveaways, I think 2 or 3 times a year. So money is no item. It's something that if somebody wants to help Mother Nature locally, they can do it, and money is really no problem.
Okay. Well, Al, thank you so much for sharing interesting bits of your past, how the media is really responsible for being a really, I guess we can call an active observer to telling the stories of what's happening. And as you said many times, being that bridge, because you can only be a bridge if you are telling the truth. And if you're not telling the truth of both sides, then that bridge will just fall down. So it's an interesting take of how we like the media to be today. And the motivation of being able to tell somebody's story, being able to be that listener in times of crisis for people is also an important story. And we don't have to be an investigative reporter to be that listener for somebody, especially now. That's something that we all can do. We can all find that compassion and that empathy today. So that's another important thing to share for all of us. So thank you for being here, Al. I'm going to say a l'chaim with the sunshine drink, which is really good, but a little too strong for me. So I'm going to put that back down, but the black coffee is good. And I want to remind people of 2 really important upcoming events next week. On Tuesday, September 1st, we have part of our Elul programming. We have a program for our Jewish Recovery Network, which wouldn't do this drink, but would do this drink. And that is a guest rabbi online doing a one-man show about his own personal recovery story from addiction. And Elul is a time where we reflect, we grow, we check them in on our own lives and see what we have to change. And that's why it's a good time to discuss again recovery. We know that our Jewish Recovery Network is all about ending the stigma of addiction in the Jewish community, and we need to do more of that. So that's September 1st. You can go on tbam.org/Elul, ELUL, to sign up for that link. On Thursday, September 3rd, next Thursday, we do have a Erev Tov show with our special guest, our member Dan Levine. We also have, following that, Sisterhood is going to have a program on Mikdash Ma'at. We know we'll be home for the High Holy Days. Find a way to make your home a Mikdash Ma'at. What is that? A small sanctuary. We're going to elevate our home so we don't just plop down in bed with a laptop or an iPad and say, oh, it's Yom Kippur. No. How do we make our home special and holy, a special meal, something beautiful, so we feel the holiness, the specialness of those Yamim Noraim, those days of awe. 2 really interesting programs, plus so much more, of course, on tbam.org. So thank you, Al, for being here. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and wish everybody a wonderful weekend. We'll see you tomorrow for Shabbat Shalom. Take care, everybody. Erev Tov.
אמרו את זה קודם לפניי, זה לא משנה, אני ואתה נשנה.